But in the meantime, we want to talk about some games. We want to do the old playlist here. So let's go around the horn. Miller, what have you been up to? What have you been playing?
I have been playing a lot of Hades, the new Supergiant game. That game is a lot of fun. I wrote a review for the website on that game, and then I kept playing after I wrote the review because it's a beast. It's a big game. It's a lot bigger than I thought it was. Not that Supergiant's previous games, Bastion, Transistor, Pyre. I mean, those were pretty hefty indie games, right? But I think I went into an expectation with Hades that it was going to be kind of similar, and that was even after I'd played a lot of early access of Hades, and was like, oh, there's a lot here. But then like you dig into the final version, and there is a lot to do in that game.
Yeah, well, let's dive. I mean, I think for playlist, it's probably the one that we all four of us have been playing. And Dan, you just held up a sign that's saying it's game of the year ? Which I saw you tweeting about that. It sounds like you love it a lot too.
I am right now. It is absolutely my game of the year. I think I have been. This game is fascinating to me, and we don't have 3 or 4 hours to talk about it. So I've tried to come up with a way to summarize one of the reasons why I think it is so fascinating to me, and that is cohesion. I think when you play a lot of other games, you get the sense that this department made this aspect of the game, this department made that aspect of the game. When you look at Hades, from the art to the music to the story to the gameplay, everything seems like it's in the exact place that it should be in this ancient Greek roguelike. And as a huge roguelike fan already, I found it fascinating that the tools this game has for players who might not even like roguelikes to be able to enjoy it. And I think it's certainly even outside of action roguelikes. I think it's my favorite action roguelike for sure. But in the entire roguelike genre, I think it has the best story and coming up with fascinating conceits behind that story. I find myself doing the side quests and side development well into my 18th victory as I currently stand.
Congrats.
And I'm still learning and discovering more every single run.
Now, you mean mechanically, or you mean like story-wise?
Both. It's fascinating as you develop. I'm going to let Miller go here in a second.
No, go for it.
But as you continually develop more options, you're gonna keep unlocking stuff. Like techniques that you use during your first 5 wins will be very different from techniques you use in your later wins, because it's likely that you've entered the Pact of Punishment system, which will basically give you new bosses and new experiences to your liking, essentially. While you fish, no less. Anyway, Miller, take it away.
Yeah, no, I agree with a lot of what you're saying. I mean, I think the thing that fascinates me in this game is the way that it hides its roguelite nature behind this great storytelling, right? Like, if you didn't know that the concept of what a rogue style game was, I think this would just feel like a natural flow. And that's because they do such a great job of integrating story and integrating the things that you choose to do into just the flow of what's happening. There's I talk about it in the review that there's you meet the character of Sisyphus in this game, who, if anybody knows their Greek mythologies, the guy who's like endlessly pushing the boulder up the hill. But they do something kind of fun with that character where they make him kind of good natured, and he's sort of fine with his task, right? He's like, oh, things happen, and he's just resigned himself to just like this is his lot in life. And the game has this quality too, right? Like, you are Sisyphus in a way, right? Like, you're this character who you're this person who's going through endless cycles of repeats through this story, but you're kind of fine with it, and you're fine with it because they've done such a good job of sort of slowly introducing new elements of that story. And on top of that, with the gameplay, they've found ways to consistently add new dynamics to play. Whether it's that early on, it's just by unlocking the new weapons, but then it's later on, it's unlocking the different aspects of those weapons. And even after you've done that and you've honed in on some favorites, let's say you really like the spear, and you even maybe particularly like a particular aspect of the spear, you're then on every single run, you're waiting to find out how your spear is going to be different this time, right? It's going to feel because of the boons that you get from these different gods as you go through your run. It maintains this sense of novelty. I think the only place that I separate from Dan a little bit about the game is that for me it's stretched a little bit too thin, which is the other thing I brought up in the review. I think for somebody who really, really likes that long-term investment roguelike, it's going to be magical, as I think it kind of has been for Dan. For me, there were times once I got to I put dozens of hours into this game, and I was still at times feeling like I wanted to have a wrap up to both the main storyline and some of the side storylines. And the game really, really asks that you wait for that for a long, long time. And I think it's not fundamentally a good thing or a bad thing. But it might be for certain individuals, right? For some people, they're going to go in with an expectation that the game is this is kind of like Pyre. I really love Pyre. I love the way they did story in that, and expect to be able to put a similar amount of time in. It's a lot more than that, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, you're saying, like, how many runs do you think you need to do? How many completed runs do you think you need to do to really wrap up the story? Because Dan, you're saying you did 18 already.
That depends what story you want to wrap up. Honestly, there are multiple threads which are independent of the main storyline, and that depends how much investment you put into them over your playthrough. So let's say you really like Thanatos. You're going to want to work your relationship with him and see where that leads, because it leads to very interesting places. Same with Achilles. Same with many of the other guys, or Orpheus and the Orpheus romance chain, sort of, so to speak. I don't want to spoil anything, but if you know Greek legends, a lot of them are here, and there's lots of really cool stuff in there threads for you to pull on if you want to. Mm-hmm. Well, of course, the core is always getting another run down and defeating the final boss. Anyway, yeah.
I mean that one for that main run. To answer your question, Ben, there are 10 completions basically that you need to do. I think it's important to understand that. I mean, they're not upfront about that, and I hope that doesn't come across as a spoiler to folks.
It was a surprise for me. I didn't know that that time was going to be the time I got credits, so I was quite surprised.
Yeah, it's interesting too, just for me. So I've been playing it quite a bit. I've like 12 hours compared to yours, but I finished it once, and so I'm like, that was fun. I felt good, and it kind of like opens up all this other stuff you can start doing. Roguelike, keep playing the game, but I didn't get a sense of like, how much more I need to play. So I haven't touched it in the last 2 days, but I'm kind of wondering if I should go back because like things feel somewhat incomplete. I don't know.
I think you're articulating a very real dilemma that players of this game are going to have, which is like, how much investment do you want to have? And I think they've built it a little bit to allow for that, right? Like, you could say that you've beaten the game now, and you could step away. Like, maybe you don't especially care about the stories that are playing out, or you don't especially love the action or whatever. So they do have that sense of like, you know what? I fought my way out of hell, right? There's then the threshold of like, you know what? I want to see the main storyline resolve, and that's these sort of 10 runs that you need to like successfully do. And then beyond that, there's more. There's a sort of epilogue story to open up. There's all these like side threads that you can open up, and that's a job of potentially hundreds of hours, really. Mm-hmm. I think depending on how you might approach it.
No, I mean it makes
how good you are.
It's just hearing that I need to do 9 more runs, completed runs to do it, like, kind of makes me like, do I want to put that time in? I don't know, because they do a good job of wrapping things up, but I'm not wholly satisfied story wise. On the flip side, though, I love the action. Like the game does it reminds me a little bit of Dead Cells, not mechanically necessarily, but Dead Cells has the thing of like the moment to moment action in that game felt so good and tight that I didn't care that I was replaying the same areas over and over again. And Hades has that kind of like feel of like, I really like the combat. There's like at least 6 different weapons. And even in those, like the weapons are so malleable depending on like what the pickups and upgrades you get. So there's so much diversity to the combat that I enjoy diving in and just ripping through a level and tearing dudes up. So that's mechanically it's been fun. It'd be a good game to like, blow off some steam one night when I come home. When I come home from work.
So, I think one of the other things they do that's really interesting that some people maybe don't know about with the game, even if you've already been playing it, is their approach to God mode. That's kind of an in joke to the game because the game is that you're a god playing with other gods. Turning that on isn't exactly the same as what it would be in another game where you're just like, oh, well, now I just breeze through everything. Instead, what it's doing is giving you increased damage resistance that moves up every time you die. And so it's a way of, like, in your case, Ben, if you wanted to just like, you know what, I want to keep going and I still want it to be this like hardcore challenge to even see if I get through the run, right? Because it's hard. I mean, it's a challenging game. Then you do that. But if instead you get to a point where you're like, well, this is cool, but now I want to write like increasingly I want to win, right? Like I want to get through these runs. Then one way that you can kind of do that and give yourself a better shot at that is to turn on that God mode with the knowledge that every time you die, your chance that you're going to do better the next time is going up, right?
Yeah,
which is a kind of a fun way to change things up for people.
For sure. Alex, as somebody who's still early on in your journey, are you early on? I think you made it to the last boss at least once, right?
Correct.
But are you excited to keep going? You think you're in for the long haul on this?
Hell yes. This game caught me off guard in such a crazy way. Because I'm really not a roguelite guy. I discovered Dead Cells this year, and that totally like sunk into my skin, and I played it like that every night. And Hades is doing the same thing. I'm curious, did all of you play on PC?
I played on PC.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Because I'm playing it on Switch, and I don't know what Supergiant did, but they should be applauded for it to make this game run so smoothly on both. I've played a lot of handheld and a lot on my TV, and just it doesn't matter. Like there's maybe been times where it chugs, maybe during like the Bone Hydra fight where like everything is on screen, but they've done such a good job of, and they needed to for that to be successful on the Switch, and I think they've knocked it out of the park.
Hold on, do you think they made some kind of deal with the devil? Is that what happened here?
Well, yeah, they had to get the licensing deal.
Oh, yeah, of course.
They get a license for
Hades is just handing it out, you know. I can echo what you guys have said. I'm in the Dan camp with the story. I'm shocked at how into the story I am, because I think I came to this with the expectation of like, I'm excited for this combat system. I'm excited to see how this drags me in. But the characters are so good and the voice actors are so good. And I think we mentioned it for a second, but the way the music ramps up in certain situations and how it just complements what's on screen is beautiful. And I've been listening to the soundtrack on Spotify, and this is a game that you guys have talked about how we can play it for 60, 70 hours or whatever. I'm loving the fact that after dinner, like, I can go play 2 runs, feel satisfied, put it back down, but also know that, okay, tomorrow I'm picking up the shield. Tomorrow, or and I'm going to try that out and see how far I can get in that run. So yeah. I'm absolutely loving it. It is in my top 10, no question. I'm curious, what weapons have you guys found the most success with? Because for me, the spear and the gauntlets are like god tier. Like I get the furthest, and I love those weapons. But
the spear's really good. I like the shield a lot too. I like that Captain America throw you can do. There's an upgrade where it hits like more dudes, and like that was some of my best successes was with that. And then also like the last weapon, the gun. I don't like the way it works, but actually that's how I beat the game, was with that thing. So it seems like it's good.
Interesting.
I don't know.
I think they're all pretty good. I've found excitement and fun with all of them. I think the spear is a good early one to get good at. That that spin attack can really save the day in more than a few circumstances. But it's a credit to the game, I think, that over the course of play, there are weapons that early on I'd almost dismissed. It's like, I don't think I like this one. That I would come back to once I knew some of the enemy types better and I knew better how to like manage my runs. That I would come to those and be like, wow, this is a really great weapon, and I can do well with this. Yeah, it's a fascinating game. To your point, Alex, one of the other things that's really cool is that it's not only that the characters are compelling and that these Greek mythology nods um, work so well. It's also that Supergiant has done something that they've often managed in their previous games, which is to make the themes and the characters feel relevant in a modern context. I mean, you'd be hard pressed to find much more ancient storylines to be tapping into than what they've done here. But it really, it ultimately feels a lot like a modern family TV drama in some ways, like in a good way. I really like the way that they paint these different characters. Hades as this overbearing father, Zagreus as this guy who's just really struggling to find his own identity away from his father's influence. That you have all these different characters that fulfill some pretty important ideas about where somebody could be in their life, and they manage to sneak that in even with minor characters. You know, characters who you only meet in brief, like some of the Olympian gods that you meet who give you these boons. Yeah.
And jumping off of that too, I think there's another world where this game is not as self-aware and willing to play with these archetypes, that because I think there's another world where, you know, they try to tell a more like early God of War, like first God of War type of stories where everyone's upset and the world's ending and stuff, but these characters and like the gods were petty, you know, that was the thing. I can't remember if it was Hades, I can't remember who says it in the game, maybe it was Achilles, but like he's like, yeah, you are a god because gods try to kill other gods, like, and that's what we do. And I think that level of awareness of these characters make this story shine even more, and I just didn't expect that in a roguelite.
Yeah, well, that's Hades.
Okay, so the
review is up on the site.
Oh yeah, Dan.
No, yeah, I like. I'll keep it short. The spear, sword, and the shield were my favorites. Obviously, the melee stuff, but I'm still getting used to the other aspects. And by the way, Alex, again, I could gush over this game for hours. But if you like the music associated with the gameplay, just wait. You'll have to play quite a bit more to unlock the Megalovania equivalent in the game, which was very, very cool and surprising. All right. Anyway, there you go.
No, that's good. Good reviews on the site. Millie, you gave it what, an 8.5, I believe.
I did.
But obviously, it's a little more. Sometimes you can boil things down to a score, and like it kind of says it all. And like in this case, I don't think it does. I think it's a little more complicated based on our discussion, obviously. So if you're at all curious, I think it's worth checking out.